Yes, we're watching the elections.
And this, we have a lot more vote to count, so I want to be very cautious in saying this, but tonally, it is fascinating that that is the message that they're
Well,
sending.
not for nothing, they did their last rally, Kamala Harris in Philadelphia on the eve of the election.
All she did was focus on
Which is exactly what.
They had their eye on the ball. I mean, you can't say, right, they didn't do that in 2016, right? She was doing Arizona, she was doing Texas, and she
The night before was in Philly.
True, but they sort of didn't do the blue one. To their credit, I mean, she lived in Pennsylvania, but I'll tell you this, we'll see. There's probably a lot of people wondering who should be the running mate? Who should be on this Democratic
We
ticket?
had that discussion, because some people will, if she
It'll be-
loses Pennsylvania, there'll be a lot of.
That's the only state, right? That'll be the end.
But because Josh Shapiro is a very popular Democratic governor who was on the short list for vice president. Let's bring Savannah Sellers into this. I mean, what are you reading out of the exit polls? Are you seeing any trend lines? I know you've got your brief, you really look at young voters and you've got your finger on the pulse there. What stands out?
Absolutely. I'll start with some numbers and then give you some anecdotal information. First, let's talk about first-time voters. This is not just young voters, but that's 57% of these first-time voters are under the age of 30. They are breaking for Trump. That is a major reversal from 2020. 53% for Trump right now, 46% for Harris. Back in 2020, 64% went for Biden. Something that I've been tracking, and I've been even watching it tonight on apps like TikTok, on apps like Instagram, when you just talk about like who's popular, who do people like? The Harris campaign had such a robust internal social media play. They had this team of 20-somethings. They had very little oversight. They were allowed to kind of post what they wanted, react in real time to trends, to the news cycle.
We
The Trump
remember Brad
campaign-
Summer and the whole Brad.
They co-opted that immediately, exactly, which by the way is a compliment to say Brad now. But for the former president, there wasn't so much going on internally. It was not as robust. He had this sort of grassroots organic catch on TikTok. I heard so many young people say to me in a positive way also, he is a meme. His things travel far. It's objectively funny when you see this information. So many young people, therefore, on these apps were served content straight from and straight about the former president. And we are hearing so much right now. I'm hearing that in lines in Arizona. Gotti was mentioning that earlier. It's so much. It was because I heard him on a podcast. It was because of this thing I saw on TikTok. I also heard from a voter in almost every single swing state and multiple in several of them, including Pennsylvania, voters who were eligible in this age group to vote in 2020 who did not. And they came out tonight to vote for the former
I'd be
president.
so interested. He's winning the youth vote in these exit polls. I'd be fascinated to see what the gender breakdown is there too, because this poll with young men, and that was a concerted effort by the Trump campaign, and the Joe Rogan and the bro wave.
Yeah.
I have
seems to
two
be real.
Gen Zers, okay? I have one who votes and one who's going to be voting next year. One in each gender, and I see it with their friends. You see it. It's real. This gap. This is not about Trump and Harris. There is a growing cultural gap, if you will, between young men and young women.
I have that
It
number
is
too,
really
if you
there.
want it. The
Yes.
gender gap on this, first-time men, Trump 62%, Harris 36%. First-time women, the gap is less here. Trump 46%, Harris 53%.
Yeah,
So
I
that
mean-
young men turnout is real.
Well, people who thought that young women would be voting in droves for Kamala Harris, especially because of reproductive rights, I mean, that exit poll does not suggest that.
Absolutely.
It doesn't, and this goes back to what Chuck has been saying, which is that the person who ultimately winds up winning this war of the sexes is the candidate who does a better job appealing to the weaker gender for them, whoever is weaker for them. And so we've seen Trump not only clearly energize, drive up young men of various different racial backdrops, but also chip away at Vice President Harris's lead. I mean, her lead among women continues to be, based on what we're seeing so far, less than his lead with men.
The gender gap is interesting, but also, as we've alluded to here on the table, the education gap is also becoming such an interesting storyline here. As Chuck talks about kind of a realignment in this moment and where we are, that's another thing to be watching for tonight. Again, it is 11:11 Eastern time, but there's still plenty of vote to come
I want
in.
to go to Tom right now. Tom, I'm looking at Wisconsin. Looks like 62% of the vote in there. You're picking up some things Sure.
Yeah, too close to call right now. Trump on top 50%. The difference is 39,000. Remember, the last two elections in Wisconsin,
So half
presidential
of the
elections,
vote from
20,000 votes
Wisconsin
was
is
the
in.
difference
So looks
between both
like
candidates here. We
Donald
want to go back to
Trump,
Madison,
Madison,
the capital of
yeah.
Wisconsin, Dane
Yeah.
County. This is also the site of the
Usually it's a
University of Wisconsin
Democratic,
as well. 92% of the
counties.
vote in. Harris doing a
So
little better
definitely
than when we
Harris
last
has
checked in
won
with her, but
Wisconsin,
again, she's slightly
Madison, and
underperforming
Dane
Biden.
County,
She still has time
which
to
is
catch up. There's still
given.
8% of the vote that's out. We actually know exactly how much of the vote is out. About 30,000 votes remain there.
Well, if
So maybe
Donald
she
Trump
picks
win
up the margins
Wisconsin,
there. We
then
also want to talk about Milwaukee.
that is
This is the biggest
definitely-
population center in the entire state of Wisconsin. Right now, 54% of the vote is in, so a lot of that vote is still out. It's probably going to be a little bit
With
later.
the
So we can call Milwaukee
45
by itself.
from-
Biden was at 69. She's down about 2 to 3
elected
points. Again, this would be
45
concerning for
from
Democrats.
California?
But look,
How many
there's still a lot of
California
vote out
has?
in Milwaukee. Door County, if you've been following the presidential race at all, everyone's been talking
How
about
many
Door
they
County in
have?
Wisconsin. It's this peninsula that shoots out into Lake Michigan. The last 6 statewide elections, presidential elections, I should say, they've picked the winner. This is a good sign for Kamala Harris. She's on top there,
How many
overperforming
vote?
Biden just slightly. 95% of the vote is in. Again, Door, if we bring it out
54.
to
So
past
if
elections,
she
it
won
almost always picks the winner
54
in the state of
in
Wisconsin.
California, they'll
So that's
push
a
her
good
to
sign for her because it's a
200.
bellwether. I do want to check in some of these Democratic strongholds.
Yeah,
Eau Claire, 92% in,
206.
kind of
But Donald
performing at
Trump
the same
will
level
have
as
like
Biden. That's good news for her. She wants to keep it there. We
220
don't have any
something
data
if he
there.
won
We have, I think here in La Crosse, this is another
Pennsylvania
Democratic
or
stronghold.
North Carolina.
92% in. Biden was at 53. She's 55, I should say. She's slightly
Oh, La Crosse.
underperforming.
Is it gonna
So
be
listen,
blue?
still a lot of vote. Let me see how much vote is still out. Still about 40% of the vote. But here's what's tough for Democrats in Wisconsin. The battleground
looks
states,
like
each of those blue
it's
wall states is
62%
different,
of
but of
votes
all
are
the
in
battleground states,
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin is the widest. So
Yeah,
they can't
so
drive up the
usually it's
margins with
about-
at least African American
he
voters
won,
and some Latino
he'll
voters
gain
that are going to
about
stay loyal to
14
Democrats in
14
this
or
election.
16
What they can do, there's about
electoral
100,000
college
college students
votes.
in the state of Wisconsin,
Yeah.
and they
Wisconsin
usually
is a
fare
swing
better,
state,
much
so
better
you
with those
cannot really
university students.
predict
We're going to have to wait and
which
see, as
way
we say
it
right there, too
goes.
close to call.
All right, we got a big
63%
projection to give right here. This is the Ohio Senate race.
Ohio,
It's a
okay.
hotly contested race.
Oh, yes,
Bernie
yes, yes.
Moreno, the car dealer, Republican, will pick up that seat, unseating the incumbent Sherrod Brown. This is quite a moment because, barring any unforeseen circumstances, it appears that Republicans, with that victory, will take control of the United States Senate. Again, it's not an official projection at that moment, but if things happen as expected, it would look like a two-seat gain here in the Senate. And so this is a hugely consequential vote here. Sherrod Brown, in a red state, was fighting for his political life. He's pulled that rabbit out of the hat a few times, but not tonight.
3 times, Savannah, and he has been someone who's been very adept at really had that working class appeal, and yet this Trump-backed candidate, Bernie Moreno, a car dealer, able to topple him tonight. Again, we've been looking for ticket splitters. Didn't find one here in the state of Ohio. Again, this in line with what we've seen, which is that ticket splitters have been diminishing.
He only overperformed, Sherrod Brown only overperformed Harris by about 2 points. He needed to overperform about 4 or 5. But this is no longer about, Democrats knew they probably